Hi class, it's Bill Berry with a quick video on how to use MySQL to explore the sample tables, databases, and data that you are supplied with from your textbook and from MySQL. Once you have these things, it's nice to know a few things about how to start exploring. So that's what this video is going to be. So we're going to answer some questions like when you're looking at databases, what tables are part of that database? When you're looking at a specific table, what kind of columns are in here and what kind of data types are set for each of those columns? Where's the primary key? What column or columns are part of that primary key? What foreign keys are in this particular table and what do they mean? What do they refer to? Also, what kind of indexes are specified and what columns are they indexing? So we'll look at that, and then last but not least, data. How many rows are in a table? How can I see the data that's in the table and scroll around in it so I can just get a sense of what kind of data I'm working with? All good questions, and all questions we'll be able to answer pretty quickly. First thing is, over on the left, you should see a list of your schemas. Now, if your screen looks more like this, remember, you can click this little guy right here, this little expander, and it's going to shut it down and move you to a place where you can see the schemas. And then if you drag this little guy, you'll see that you can switch back and forth between management and schemas, but most of the time we care about the schemas anyway, so we'll leave that up there. Then on the lower left, remember, that's an information panel. So if you click on a particular one, a particular item, you'll see some information about it down here. So those are the places we want to look for the moment. So let's just open up one of the simple ones. Let's look at the OM table. Now, it would be really nice if every time we looked at a table or a database, we saw an enhanced entity relationship diagram or EER diagram magically shown to us, and that would be great because that's a little bit easier to comprehend sometimes, but it's not the way it is. So we need to explore this way until we learn how to build EERs from the data, or of course we can look at one that's supplied to us. But let's look and see what kind of tables are part of the OM database. OM stands for order management. So if I click this little expander, these little arrows are expanders and contractors. So you can open up something, you can expand here, and you can collapse by doing the opposite. So to look at the tables that are part of that, you can click the expander, and then you'll see here's a list of the tables. There are 4 tables as part of this. If you click on one of those tables, you will see down in the lower left all of the column definitions. So this is an important thing for us to do. So let's look at customers first. So for table customers, you'll see that there is a customer ID, and you'll see that that is marked as the primary key. And then it gives a list of all the other columns, and it gives their data types. You may not know what all of them are. This is an integer, this is a character type thing. Don't worry about that too much, but it's kind of fun to go explore those things. So that's nice to know. There's all of the columns in that table, and you can do the same thing by clicking around and seeing all of these things. All right. So that's a very useful thing to be able to do. Notice we don't see much of information about foreign keys. That'll take us another minute to figure out, but we will be able to see down here that there's more, and we'll learn more about that in a second. So that's a great thing to do as a first step. Now you can also open these things up by expanding, and you can see specifics about columns. So you can go click there and see, click on each one if you like and see more information about them. That's fine. But you can also see if there are foreign keys, which there are not. Notice there's not an arrow next to this. And when you click it, you just get the same information as when you click tables. So there's no foreign keys here, and there's no triggers. Triggers we'll learn about later. But indexes are kind of interesting. If you open that up, this just says you have a primary key index, which will always be true, right? You automatically get an index set up. Now, what is an index? An index is a magical data structure that lets you find things very quickly. A primary key by its very nature is a unique key, and often, almost always, we're going to use that to look stuff up in the table. So having an index makes it very quick to look that thing up, and it makes it very fast for foreign keys to find things and match them up to the primary key in another table. So that's the magic of indexes and how you see what's provided. And this is just a primary key index, and that is based on customer ID. No surprise. Is it unique? Of course. And it don't care about this B tree thing, right? That's just a little bit of the technical stuff behind it. We don't care. Now let's look at another one where we know there's something else. So let's look at orders. So in orders, we can see the columns. So if we click on that, we can see there's an order ID, customer ID, order date, and ship date. Great. What other indexes? Ah, look, this has a primary key, but it also has another one called orders FK customers, orders foreign key customers. And if you look at this one, it is a customer ID based index. So this says, hey, that kind of makes sense to us because we're going to find out in a second that the foreign key here is going to be the customer ID, and it makes sense to index that again because it's used as a primary key in another database. Foreign key here, you're often linking those tables together. You'd want an index on that, and that's why this one's created. So you can find a little bit more about that. In fact, let's look at foreign keys. If you click on foreign key here and we expand this so we can read this, it says that we have a thing called customers. Customer ID goes into customer ID. So basically in the orders table, we are saying that we are linking to the customers table and the customer ID here. So we know that our customer ID here is related to the customer ID in that table. So that's a good thing to understand. So we can see a whole bunch about a table by clicking around in here. And in fact, you can start to get kind of a mental model of what the ER diagram or EER diagram is going to look like. I still like to have one. I still think it's nice, but that gives you a pretty good start on understanding the tables, etc. For the world, it's the same thing. We'll look at simple tables. Here's city. It's got some basic stuff here. Here's country. It's got an interesting data type with an enumeration, and etc. You can keep looking at all of these tables, including really complicated ones. If you want to see a giant one, you can look at Sakila because it's got a whole bunch of data. So that's a little bit about how you explore the first part here, what tables are present, and then we answered under exploring tables, what kind of columns, what kind of primary keys, foreign keys, indexes, we answered all of that. So the last thing we want to look at briefly is how can we explore data that's in a table? Two things we want to do here. First, pay attention to this one little detail here. Right above the script area, you can see that you can make a choice, and by default, it's going to limit you to so many records. I think the default is like 200 records. Basically, what that says is when you're playing, you probably don't want to accidentally return 1,000,000 records from a database. Now, none of these databases have tables that are that big, but a lot of real databases do. And if you run a query, you're not only taking your time, but you're taking the server's time to do an awful lot of work and return you a lot of data. And that's kind of being a bad citizen when all you're doing is messing. So if you're messing around, make it a small subset, right? Limit yourself to 50 rows or something like that so that you know absolutely that you're not going to be hitting the server or creating a lot of, wasting a lot of bandwidth anywhere. So that's one thing to look at. The next thing is to go get something out of one of these. All you have to do, we'll use, let's see, AP as an example maybe. To look at those tables like the invoices or vendors table, you just need to right click that and say select rows. And if you do that, you will see the query that is generated by your request, right? Select star from ap.vendors. Then you see a couple of really useful things. Down here at the bottom in the results area or the actions area, you'll see what the command was. You'll see a little check mark saying it succeeded, and it will tell you how many rows it returned. Now in this case, we said 50 rows, so of course it only returned 50 rows. But interestingly, if we say don't limit, and then I go do the same thing, right? Now it'll say 122 rows. So we know that there are exactly 122 rows or records in the vendors table of the AP database. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, you can also move around these sliders to give yourself more or less room. I have kind of a small screen here. So in this case, I can move the slider and now I can go look at the data itself. So you'll see here a list of all of the data, and you scroll to the right to see the rest of the columns. There's a lot of columns. You can start seeing, hey, there's some nulls here. There's some data that just wasn't supplied. Right? So that becomes an interesting thing. You can also scroll down. You can use your mouse wheel to do that, right, and scroll through that data. Often you'll also see a scroll bar over here. I don't see that because these guys are in the way, but you often will see a scroll bar, and you can use that as well. It's just hidden here. There we go. So you can use scroll bars to move around the data and kind of play and see what's going on. That's a pretty good thing to do for now, to understand the data, to get a look at it, and also to know how many things were returned when you make certain kinds of queries. Again, there's a scroll bar. Why it's not showing exactly, I don't know, but you can click down here and you can scroll around. So that's a quick introduction to how to do quick looks at the data that's in a particular table. Again, right click, say select rows, and you'll see how many. Right, in this case, vendors had 122 rows, but we have another, let's see, we have another one. Why can't we get it? There we go. So anyway, you will see the results of that, and then you'll be able to play with that data right here. Let's just make this a little bigger. There we go. So 114 invoices are in this particular database. And again, play with the little dividers and you can make the screen show you a little more of what you want to see. So that brings us to the end of the topics that we wanted to cover. So we learned how to look at a database to see what tables, looking within a table to find out about columns and keys and indexes, and we looked at data within a table to see how many there were, how many rows, and also scrolling around left and right and sort of peeking at the data to see what we're going to be dealing with, which is all useful stuff to do if you're going to start querying the data. That brings us to the end of the topics for this video. I hope that's been useful in learning a little bit more about how to explore. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.